Is there more of an opportunity for a crossover here and there with Marvel characters in the movies?
I think if you listen to the characters that are working on currently and you put them all together, there's no coincidence that may someday equal the Avengers. I think just having that possibility on the horizon is something that excites all of us.
We're mixing it up a little bit this week, but don't worry, we'll dive back into the final season of Game of Thrones in the future.
You're not sure how you feel about that?
No, I'm not.
Recently, some of the fam watched the first Avengers movie, and my father and I were discussing it at work. The chemistry the characters had, some of the classic moments. And it was actually the very first movie that I went to the midnight premiere of. And my dumb 19-year-old self had only watched Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2 up to that point.
You colossal idiot.
The idea of a cinematic universe was still foreign to a lot of us, and we had no idea of the kind of monster that the MCU would become. That's what we're discussing today. How Marvel Studios achieved the impossible. But before we start that discussion, I'd like to remind you all that I live stream on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday.
Do I look to be in a gaming mood?
And you can also find me posting nonsense on Twitter and Instagram. Now it's time to find out exactly how Marvel made all of this happen.
Right. Better clench up, Legolas.
To really grasp how impactful the Avengers was, I think we have to have an understanding of what the scope of superhero movies looked like pre-Avengers. To do that, we even have to look past the movie that gave Marvel Studios their start, Iron Man. X-Men and Spider-Man ruled the early 2000s and were the first superhero movies to really gain mainstream attention. I'd even give a slight nod to Fantastic Four, but just a slight one. Sure, you had Batman and Superman in the 80s, but Batman in the 90s isn't remembered for being anything spectacular.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
Talk about your cold shoulder.
Let's kick some ice.
X-Men and Spider-Man were groundbreaking. Of course, the Nolan Batman trilogy was a heavy hitter, but The Dark Knight wasn't released until a month after Iron Man was, so it hadn't quite hit its peak yet. And what a peak that would be. Now backtracking a little bit, Marvel was in dire straits in the 90s financially, and had to sell off the rights to some of their biggest characters just to survive. X-Men and the Fantastic Four went to 20th Century Fox, Spider-Man went to Columbia Pictures, and Hulk went to Universal Studios. Kevin Feige, who would later go on to be the head of Marvel Studios, was actually an associate producer on the first X-Men film. Now what I didn't know was that Marvel had the ability to give creative input on films like Spider-Man 3 and the second Fantastic Four film, Rise of the Silver Surfer. And they could have used it. Kevin Feige says, quote, "We didn't have control. I hated that. I remember thinking, if something's not going to work, I'd rather it be because we had what we thought was a good idea and it just didn't work, versus we were unable to convince the decision maker to do X, Y, or Z," unquote. At this point with Marvel, it wasn't a lack of creativity that was the problem, it was a lack of finances. This article by Variety says, quote, "In order to raise $525 million from Merrill Lynch to finance its first slate of films, including Iron Man, the Hulk, Thor, and Captain America the First Avenger, Marvel gambled the movie rights to those properties as collateral," unquote. That's what's so cool about this story to me, the amount of faith that they had to have in the project. So now it was time to assemble the team and start the process of making the first films under the new company name, Marvel Studios. Those involved were the original studio head, Avi Arad, Kevin Feige, the director of Iron Man, Jon Favreau, and obviously the star of Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. The very first movie that Marvel Studios made was Iron Man, but The Incredible Hulk was also released that year. Honestly, even though the Hulk movie isn't anything special, having a familiar property to lean on probably helped move the process along instead of filming Iron Man and something like Thor to start with. People weren't exactly all in on Iron Man at the time either. Kevin Feige says, quote, "We didn't have Spider-Man. We didn't have Fantastic Four. We had the B-list characters. That was the LA Times or somebody's headline. I never really thought that because I knew that Iron Man was really cool and Hulk was, arguably, next to Spider-Man, the biggest character we had. I thought they all had amazing potential, but the goal was to deliver these two movies, make the best Iron Man film we could, and make the best version of Hulk, even coming 5 years after another version of Hulk," unquote. So they bring in director Jon Favreau, who at the time hadn't done a film this massive before, and Robert Downey Jr. to star as Tony Stark. Favreau says, quote, Marvel was a studio that people were a bit dismissive of, and the superhero genre was one that people felt was at the end of its run. You had The Dark Knight, which cast a very large shadow, but it felt like it was connected to that particular bit of intellectual property and to Chris Nolan. The caliber of superheroes we were talking of bringing out there, it wasn't a sure thing, unquote. That's just wild to me. The idea that people were growing tired of the superhero genre and thinking that Marvel was bringing in the B-list characters for some last-minute profit is insane to think about now. Before Iron Man is released, studio head Avi Arad actually leaves Marvel, which just creates one more challenge of getting this movie out. Fast forwarding a bit, Iron Man comes out and is a hit. Robert Downey Jr. is terrific as Tony Stark.
I am Iron Man.
Jeff Bridges is an excellent villain.
So
Wait, the technology. William, here is the technology. I've asked you to simply make it smaller.
Okay, sir, and that's what we're trying to do, but honestly, it's impossible.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave! With a box of scraps!
And it's still one of the best Marvel Studio films out there. They even laid the groundwork for future films with this scene after the credits with Samuel L. Jackson showing up as Nick Fury.
Who the hell are you? Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
The Incredible Hulk is released later and does well at the box office, but like I said, was the more forgettable film of the two. It's just, I don't know, kind of bland. Ed Norton is alright, and the writing isn't anything special, but it's still better than the Hulk movie that came out before this.
Wasn't so bad.
No, it's perfect.
Even with this financial success, Marvel had to battle through their own character introductions to even get to the Avengers. Iron Man 2, Thor, and Captain America the First Avenger would present their own challenges. Iron Man 2 made a ton of money, but really it was just an okay film.
I want my bird. My bird. I can get you a bird, I can get you 10 birds. I want my bird.
And is memorable to me basically because of this badass briefcase suit. Thor had its moments.
This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
But was kind of an average film too. I know I'll get a lot of flack for this, but I think The Dark World is a better film of the two. So many tilted camera shots. With that said, I am glad that the blonde eyebrows have not made a comeback yet. Captain America is by far the best film of the three, and was the last film to precede the Avengers. One thing they all had in common was strong title characters, and even the minor characters in these films held their weight. There's excellent casting throughout, which Marvel is still known for. The fun part about this video for me was researching the intricate issues that Marvel had in getting the Avengers started. Of course, the first one that comes to mind is the Ed Norton issue. He's obviously not in the Avengers, so what happened? Well, there was some dispute over the direction of the first Hulk film. Supposedly, Marvel wanted to go in one direction, and Norton wanted to go in another. Maybe that's why the film feels off. It just doesn't feel like it knows what it wants to be.
Pull back now. Pull back.
Is that all you got?
After the lengthy contract disputes and story disputes, Norton ends up getting the boot by Marvel. After further research, I don't think he would have done the Avengers anyway because of the level of commitment Marvel requires with these films. He says, quote, "We had positive discussions about going on with the films, and we looked at the amount of time that would have taken, and I wasn't going to do that. I honestly would have wanted more money than what they would have wanted to pay me," unquote. However, at the time, it was very much a bad breakup with the Avengers on the horizon. That brings us to his replacement, Mark Ruffalo, who shines in this movie as Bruce Banner. I was pretty excited about the recasting, and Ruffalo fits right in with the rest of the cast. For Marvel to have to recast one of their biggest characters before their biggest movie, I don't think it could have gone over any more smoothly.
Dr. Banner, now might be a really good time for you to get angry.
That's my secret, Captain. I'm always angry.
Another thing that I didn't know was something that Kevin Feige mentioned in this Thrillist article. He says, quote, People forget that we started making Avengers before either Thor or Captain America were released. What if people hated Thor? What if people thought Loki was ridiculous? What if people didn't buy this super soldier frozen in ice? We were in the first quarter of production on a giant movie at the time, and we weren't going to stop. It was sort of all in at that point. Unquote. Another thing I didn't know, last one, I promise, was just how hands-on Joss Whedon was with this whole project. I knew that the movie had a Whedon feel, but I didn't know that he wrote the entire screenplay, and what a screenplay it was. This is some of Joss Whedon's best work, and before the witty writing and quips started to wear thin on some people, this was a breath of fresh air in the superhero genre.
How does Fury even see these?
He turns.
Sounds exhausting.
It was a superhero movie that wasn't up its own ass, and that was one of the biggest reasons why it was a hit.
Enough! You are all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
Puny god.
I remember rolling my eyes at Whedon saying that he was totally exhausted after the second Avengers movie, but after doing all this research and seeing that he wrote the screenplay for both movies, and you factor in the pressure that he heaped on himself, let alone the pressure that was already there, it's totally understandable. So, Mr. Whedon, if you've been waiting for an apology from me, I'm sorry. I'm still waiting for one for Justice League. For a movie with as many characters as this one has, it would be understandable for some of them to get lost in the shuffle, but that's not the case here. We're slowly drip-fed the introductions of these characters until we ultimately get them all in the same room.
No surprises.
Ow! Hey!
Nothing?
Are you nuts?
Sure, Sam.
And the drip feed that I'm talking about is not only perfect in just bringing them into the story, but showing us what these characters are all about. Maybe excluding the introductions of Fury, Coulson, and Hawkeye, because they're basically just guarding the Tesseract until Loki shows up. But we have Black Widow in the middle of an interrogation and doing what she does best, which is kicking ass. We have Banner in self-exile, and despite that, he's still trying to help people. Cap is working on self-improvement, even though he's a freaking super soldier. Iron Man appropriately has the most showmanship with his introduction.
Make your move, reindeer games.
And Thor's all business.
Do not touch me again.
Then don't take my stuff.
You have no idea what you're dealing with.
Shakespeare in the Park?
Doth mother know you weareth her drapes?
I cannot overstate how much everyone brings it in this movie.
Yeah. Big man in a suit of armor. Take that off. What are you?
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
Everyone nails their part, and I think this says a lot for their belief in the movie, the direction of the movie, and the quality of the script. Even Clark Gregg shines as Agent Coulson in a very, very crowded cast.
You lack conviction. I don't think So that's what it does.
I remember how impressed I was with the cohesion of all the characters when I first saw this movie. To me, it's still one of the best balancing acts in cinema, and not just superhero movies. There are so many characters that need screen time, and they all get it. To me, The Avengers is this chaotic blend of humor and character balancing that still impresses me today.
Not a great plan. When they come, and they will, they'll come for you.
I have an army.
We have a Hulk.
It was something we'd never seen before. Previous superhero movies had struggled with even having 4 or 5 big characters in play, and the Avengers had over 10. And they made it all work. There are countless memorable moments here, and that's just another reason why it's still one of the best movies in the MCU. Needless to say, the success of the Avengers made a great impact on the superhero genre. Not only did the Avengers kick off Phase 2 of the MCU, but it also gained a lot of interest from Marvel's competitors. Since the Avengers, we've seen a flock of studios try to replicate that success with mixed results. DC scrambled to immediately accomplish what took Marvel 6 years to achieve, and Sony was in the process of working on an expanded universe with their Spider-Man reboot before the fallout with Andrew Garfield. There was even an attempt to make an expanded universe after the Mummies reboot and release. Wait, they tried to create an expanded universe for the Mummy? What the Marvel has continued to grow into a cinematic giant as their competition, aside from a few films, fell short of the standard that the MCU set. I had a lot of fun doing the research for this video, seeing the challenges that Feige and Marvel had just to get rolling, and seeing what all of this hard work would turn into is incredibly impressive. If you're intrigued at all by the creative process, I would highly recommend the Thrillist article that I have linked in the description. I only pulled a few quotes from what is an insanely informative article about what went into creating the Avengers. 10 out of 10 would recommend. There's a lot of great information out there on this topic, and you can find all of the links to the sources I use in the description down below. The Avengers was such an awesome surprise at the time, and it's still a favorite of mine. The fact that Marvel made Feige's belief a reality while they asserted their dominance in the film industry still blows my mind today.
Prove it. Put that hammer down.
Yeah, no. Bad call. He loves his hammer.
You want me to put the hammer down?
I can't wait to see what the future holds for the superhero genre for sure, but also the MCU. Phase 3 is complete, and a lot of people, including myself, grew up with the heroes that are now hanging it up.
Are we done here?
I can't wait to see what Phase 4 and the future brings us. I'd like to hit you all with another reminder that you can find me live streaming on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, and I release videos every Tuesday. So if you'd like to watch the new stuff as soon as it's out, be sure to slap that subscribe button and ring that bell on your way out. If there's anything you'd like to see me cover in the future, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace out, everybody.
If it's all the same to you, I'll have that drink now.
All the way back here, freaking 385 meters away.
Isn't that?
Oh, someone just parachuted in.
Kill the motherfucker! Oh my god! He got shit mixed. This guy's gonna be all over my ass as soon as I put out this smoke.
Car coming. Yep.
Get him. Fight him out. Chase him out.
Did you get run over? Oh no. Don't revive him, he doesn't deserve